Okay, thank you guys. That's the end of the class. If you guys have any questions, I'll be over at my desk and you can ask me. Hopefully I can answer those questions that you might have for the final exam. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Hey teacher.
Yeah?
I didn't understand about the topic of today. Who is Louis Pasteur? What does he do and what does it have to do with biology?
Well, first let me explain to you the scientific context and then I'll explain to you the historic context. Louis Pasteur was born on December 27, 1822, in the Jura region of France. He grew up in a poor family of tanners in the town of Arfois, with his father, Jean-Joseph Pasteur. Pasteur was skilled at drawing and painting. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in 1840, his Bachelor of Science degree in 1842, and a doctorate in 1847 at the École Normale in Paris. Pasteur did and accomplished many things once and after he became a professor of chemistry, but one of the biggest things that he discovered was pasteurization. Pasteur discovered that bacteria were responsible for souring wine and beer, and that heating them just enough would kill most of the bacteria that caused spoilage. This would prevent these beverages from turning sour. Today, the process of pasteurization is used widely in the dairy and food industries for microbial control and preservation of the food we consume. Another discovery that is acknowledged from him is his work on proving wrong spontaneous generation. For centuries, people and scientists believed that simple, living organisms could come into being by spontaneous generation. For the people, it was common knowledge that simple organisms like worms, frogs, and salamanders could come from mud, dust, and non-preserved food. Pasteur found that contamination of the media only occurred upon exposure to the outside environment, showing that some element was needed to give rise to life. In other words, life does not arise spontaneously. So even though Pasteur made some research and projects about this topic, some more evidence had to be found. Therefore, it took a better understanding of germ theory and cell theory to finally get rid of the scientific theory. To prove this, Pasteur made an experiment where he put broth into several special flasks in order to trap any dust particles coming in. He proved with this experiment that microorganisms were carried by dust, not air. Basically, with this he proved that life doesn't arise spontaneously. Why was this experiment a big hit? Because it changed the entire perspective of where life comes from and how it rises. It told people that what they believed in for a long time was actually wrong. And finally, one of the biggest contributions that he made to science and research was his work on the first vaccines. The most important vaccines that he made were for anthrax and rabies. The way he came up with this was by his theory called germ theory of disease. This theory stated that microscopic organisms were the root cause of many diseases, and identifying them could counter or prevent the effects of the disease. This theory, however, had a huge controversy. Even though Pasteur had a big reputation in France, he was not a licensed physician. Regardless, his discoveries would bring modern hygiene and other medical procedures. The anthrax vaccine helped with livestock in France, such as cattle and sheep, and the rabies vaccine helped with the removal of rabies on animals such as dogs. He tested these vaccines on sheep, rabbits, and horses. Once the vaccines were proved to work, he tried them on a boy that was bitten by a rabbit dog in 1885. The procedure on the boy was successful, and after this, he treated patients with vaccines in his laboratory full-time. Thanks to these experiments and research on vaccines, he was able to open the gates to new discoveries for other diseases. He gave us the theory of being able to find out diseases and how to cure them.
The discoveries that Pasteur made are great, but what was going on in Europe while he was coming up with these things? The answer is simple. He was living on the time period of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a time that began in the 18th century when many important inventions were made. Many of these inventions made work easier and cheaper. As these inventions created new manufacturing and industry, many people also moved away from farms into cities. It was a time of very rapid change in the world. In the case of Pasteur, he made contributions to science and medicine. He clarified and discovered situations and theories that existed on the scientific world. His research on fermentation came from the request of Napoleon III. He asked Pasteur to research on conserving wine in order to trade it with other countries as the British. They were complaining that the wine contained diseases. With this request from Napoleon, Pasteur got to work and brought good results. His experiments against spontaneous generation rose because the theory mentioned the region of microscopic organisms and the part played by them in fermentation. This theory imposed Pasteur's ideas, which forced him to solve the question to spontaneous generation. And finally, his work on vaccines was influenced by the diseases and rabies that were striking Europe in the 19th centuries. He began his work on vaccines in 1880. All of his major contributions rose from situations that were occurring on the Industrial Revolution. They were all meant for good and for improving the conditions that we live in when it comes to research and technology.
Overall, we can say that Pasteur is considered a huge benefactor of humanity for his development of vaccines, his experiments that prove spontaneous generation wrong, and for his description and discoveries on fermentation. His discoveries made him responsible for some of the most important theoretical concepts and practical applications of modern science. He also gave birth to new branches of science. The research that he made had to do with the time period, which was the Industrial Revolution. The rapid changes that occurred in the world throughout the entire Industrial Revolution allowed him to expose and investigate more research that would make lives easier with new technologies and clarifications. Thanks to these investigations, he was able to open new gates to opportunities and new discoveries.